You guys all for joining this last paper session of the conference. Today, we're going to be talking to you about the updates to the RESNA position paper on the application of tilt, recline, lower extremity positioning for wheelchairs. And we'll talk a little bit about how we've adapted some of this terminology so far. I guess we should introduce ourselves. I'm Jennith Bernstein, physical therapist. I am clinical affairs manager for Permobile, so you'll see that in our disclosures, and I'll let Jillian introduce herself.
Yeah, but I'm Jillian Stamatelos. I'm an occupational therapist in the inpatient seating clinic at McGee Rehab in Philadelphia.
So what we're going to share with you today is the updates that we've been making working on for the updates to the position paper, as we described just a moment ago in the title. We're going to show you how we are standardizing and updating some of the language that was used in the previous position paper. Some of the new emerging topics that we have discussed, such as anterior tilt, and then we will show you how we're updating the paper just to keep up with some of the newer trends that we've seen as we've been reviewing the literature. Of course, it is not just the two of us working on such a task. Heather here is one of our also co-authors, along with Grace, who is now an actual occupational therapist, but started with us as part of her occupational therapy degree, leading us in how do you do a literature search. These years postgraduate for us was challenging, so she was very helpful with that. Tabatha also has a disclosure in that she is employed by New Motion, but she is also an occupational therapist. And then Rebecca, who some of you may know here from Pittsburgh, as a physical therapist. So as we said, Heather and myself, both employed by Permobile, Tabatha as New Motion. So just to take you back to how this position paper initially began, the very first publication or presentation of this work was in 2008. And then subsequently, it was updated again in February of 2015. But that literature only included up to 2013. If any of you guys have been part of a RESNA position paper, by the time it actually gets out to the public, your literature search is sometimes a year and a half old, and I'm sure any experienced researcher here has that same scenario, but that is something that with volunteers doing literature reviews sometimes happens. And so for our paper, Jillian actually proposed this back in April 2021, but several delays through the pandemic caused us to actually initiate the work in April of 2022. So for this new update, you'll see literature ranging from 2014 up to 2022 for any of the new updates. So our question was really initiated based off of how can power seat functions reduce secondary complications while promoting function, independence, and participation. And you'll notice it does say power in our question. We'll talk about that as we go through. But we realized that there were quite a few of excellent areas that were already established in the current position paper. We didn't really need to start all over from scratch. So we went with the similar areas of function and performance that were in the previous paper, so that we didn't just completely make up our own ideas. And so through our literature search here through PubMed, CINAHL, and Ovid databases, we searched through over 1,200 articles, in total about 1,700 articles from all three databases. We did filter out for peer review, as well as for those that were available in the English language. we quickly realized that a lot of the literature that was pulled based off of our search criteria, I'll show you in just a moment, was really focused on pressure injuries. And that was probably 80% of the new literature from 2014. And so we did realize we had to go outside of our review process to search for some other topics that didn't pop up in our initial search. So when you do have access to the finished paper, you'll see a delineation between the ones that came up throughout the scoping review process and then the ones that were used as supplemental material. So here are a few of our PICO question descriptions. So our population initially included any individual using a power wheelchair. So we didn't want to exclude based off of diagnosis, age, any type of demographic. And the reason it says power wheelchairs is because when we were reviewing the current paper, it's really is focused just on power seat functions. There's little bit of mention about manual tilt in space, manual recline, but we wanted to get the biggest amount of data possible. And you'll notice even in our search terms, it does say power tilt, anterior, power tilt. But by just adding posterior tilt as well, we were able to capture some of those manual seat functions. So we did not want to limit to any diagnosis. So we included just about everything that we could think of that would be related to using seating functions. We wanted to think about, for our outcomes, was there a reduction in any complication that a person might experience, or how did it enhance independence and participation? We did really look for edema management, contractures, quality of life, including well-being and independence, and using some of those ICF terms, such as the goals of participation. So just as a summary, the only things that we were really excluding, because there are two separate papers dedicated to those other seat functions of power seat elevate and power standing, those are in two separate documents, so we did not include those in our search. Also, we did not include any systematic reviews or meta-analyses, just so that we could make our own assessment of the literature as it was published instead of as it was reviewed by previous authors. So Jillian will take over and tell you about our updates.
Which button is it? Okay. All right. So as we were pretty much going through the wealth of articles that we found, and then also combing through the previous paper with a fine-tooth comb, we thought about some of the updates that maybe we would want to start with. One of them that we noticed was just terminology. So some of the terminology is inconsistent throughout the paper, and then some of the terminology is a little bit outdated. So the biggest one, obviously, is the change from pressure ulcer or pressure sore to now pressure injury. So just making sure that we're updating that and making sure that's all the same and consistent throughout the paper. Also, we have been having a lot of discussions about lower extremity positioning. The original paper talks a lot about elevating leg rests and power elevating leg rests, but as we know now, we have power elevating and articulating leg rests, and there are also the leg rests that will elevate, or excuse me, extend down to the floor. So just thinking of different ways that the lower extremities will be positioned. We also wanted to change the word feature more to the word function, because we want it to be a little bit more related to how it's enhancing the person's life and how they're functioning using these seat functions in their chair.
Just a nice to have.
Yes, right. Yes, it's not just a feature that's nice to have, it's actually something that's helping them function. When available, as we just talked about, we did start noticing there were some more updates about manual solutions in some of these articles, and we did want to make that a little bit more apparent within the paper, that it isn't just necessarily a power function that would provide the updates, it would also be the manual. We also, I think in the previous paper, there wasn't as much in terms of how it's going to function and help them with their activities of daily living. And it was a little bit more focused on some of the medical options. So we also wanted to add more of a focus on that, especially with a lot of OTs on our panel. Also, there was mention of sitting tolerance, but there isn't really a great definition for it. So If Heather was up here, she would talk a lot about that. We also wanted to expand the section that's on speech, swallowing, and cognition. When I show you the next slide of what the previous paper focused on, they do mention that, but there really isn't a part in the paper that expands on it. So it's listed as something that these seat functions can assist with, but there's not really a lot of literature supporting it in the paper. We also wanted to update and expand the study or the case study section at the end of the paper so that it follows more of a format like the service provision guide. So that the service provision guide kind of has them listed almost as like an activity analysis, similar to even how we would write our evaluation. Whereas in the current paper, they're just a little bit more of a narrative.
The current slide is hidden. What the current topics.
Oh,
Yeah, we can unhide it real quick.
sure. How do you do that?
Sorry, 1 second. I think we accidentally have a hidden slide.
Oh, yep.
Like it never
Alright.
happens.
Okay, so the previous topics on the position paper are listed here. I'll give you a second to look at them. I don't think I need to read them all out to you. But this is what the paper talked about, what was going to be talked about and what literature would be supporting. I'll give you another second here. And as we went through, these are the updated topics. So we really wanted to focus on function, as I said, some mobility related activities of daily living, transfers, things like that. Another section on posture, so alignment, contractures, and repositioning. The section on communication and cognition, speech, swallowing, visual orientation, alertness, and arousal. A section on the physiological functions, spasticity, edema, respiration, bowel, bladder. Pressure management and redistribution, which we know there is a wealth of articles and support about that. The sitting tolerance section, which includes things like comfort, fatigue, pain, and pain management. And then overall, just how is this going to enhance someone's quality of life and their participation? As we were going through, these are some of the new emerging topics that we started looking at. And I have some of the citations here. I'm actually going to grab this because it has some of the explanations. So the first one is the sitting tolerance. So the intersection of pain, comfort, and fatigue on sitting tolerance and participation. So in the article, they really stress that posture and seating, along with interventions for pain relief, should be just considered part of the rehab process. So the research in this article provided reasonings for why clinicians should focus on the application of power seat functions as a way to promote increased sitting tolerance during seating and mobility. The next one we discussed is power or anterior tilt. So as you know, anterior tilt, you bring the chair up and lean it forward. And this article from Dr. Rice really talked about how that seat function would allow for increased independence with transfers. So we know we do want to expand on that because we know there are many other uses for anterior tilt, such as functional reach and things like that. So that's a new section that will be added. The other one is what we spoke about earlier. So power height adjustable foot plates. So the foot plates that will go up and down to the floor. And in Dr. Rice's article, it does discuss this also as a transfer assist. We also know that it can decrease other secondary issues such as falling if someone doesn't have to lean forward and try to flip up their foot plates. The next emerging topic is always technology, right? More technology. So the use of technology to assist with repositioning and prevention of pressure injuries. And I believe this WU article was focusing on Permobile's virtual seating coach, but most of the other manufacturers also have something similar to this, as well as other apps and things that are being developed as well to assist people with reminding them to do their pressure relief, to kind of show them what their angles are in the chair, to give them an overall view at the time of how often are they repositioning. And you're also able to sort of send data to the clinician if you want and really use it as a teaching tool. Another thing that was somewhat emerging in the literature, but also came out of a lot of our discussions, is just ensuring the seating system is appropriate and optimized before utilizing any of these interventions. So it doesn't really matter if you have all these cool options on your chair for tilt and recline and all of this, if your seating system and posture in general is not good. This came out of a lot of the pressure injury research that we were looking at. So we really want to focus on that in the paper and really make sure that everyone understands that this needs to be the first thing you do before you start adding into the seat functions. And finally, as we spoke about, using the seat functions to promote occupational engagement. So the article from Harron and Bannigan in 2018 really was talking about how the use of tilt and space wheelchairs was associated with increasing occupational engagement because it allowed them to spend longer periods of time in their chair, which again goes back to the sitting tolerance, and allows them to participate in a wider range of activities and improve their overall quality of life. Some barriers that we've been coming up with through this process. So we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but the majority of the newer research is really focused on pressure injury. So we were having a little bit more of a difficult time finding new research in other areas, especially some of the physiological areas, as well as communication and cognition. We're still looking at research in these areas. I've kind of moved into looking at some articles from the speech therapy world and things like that, looking at swallowing and positioning for that. We also sometimes had difficulty accessing and sharing between each other some of the full text journal articles. It's a process. We don't have direct access, so you sort of have to request these articles, then they get sent to you.
Some of them are not open access, so as not affiliated with a research facility or university, we don't have access to a lot of these full text. So open access is great.
Yeah,
those that are publishers.
And I actually am, I'm employed by Thomas Jefferson University technically, but still it doesn't give me the ability to just grab all the articles. Also, this isn't on here, but just a difficulty of just, there being 6 of us in 6 different places and being full-time working professionals, just finding the time to be able to meet together and share the information. So that was difficult, but I think we're doing a pretty good job. And then again, which we just talked about, the initial search was pretty power focused. And then as we were looking through the literature and realizing that there were more manual options and that we should be adding them in as well, it's kind of, we're looking for more articles to support that as well. So what's next? Jennith has gone through this process before, so I'm going to let her explain kind of how the process works and what the next things are that we have to do.
Yeah, so we are finalizing our draft, putting all of our sections together, as well as redefining or validating RESNA's position on all of these seat functions. Then we are required to have expert reviews. And so Michelle Lang is going to be one of our reviewers, as she was one of the original authors of the 2015 paper. And then we'll have one additional, Dr. DiCiano, who is also one of the original authors of the 2015 paper, will review for us. And then we'll make, of course, I'm sure there will be edits. I mean, just a few probably. And then we hope to present at the RESNA conference. We actually weren't sure we'd be ready to present the full results. So we're still working with the RESNA committee to get us in there and be able to present.
And then our deadline that we gave ourselves as well.
And it will be done by then. And then it will enter an open comment period. So anyone that is a RESNA member will be able to go onto the website and provide, read the entire paper and provide comments and feedback. And that's usually a 60-day period. I did see they expedited it for the scoping review to 30 days, but I anticipate a 60-day period of time. Of course, go through any additional edits required, and then it will be presented to the RESNA Board of Directors to review and ask us any questions back, and then be posted to resna.org. And it is available at no charge currently. You do have to, if you're not a RESNA member, you do have to register for a free membership to access, or a free profile to access these papers, but it does not cost anything. And then our goal ultimately is to get it published in the AT journal, just so it's easier to cite and gives a little bit more validity to the content, because some of the previous papers aren't necessarily published in the AT journal. So we would love to hear from you guys what maybe we have missed or what you would like to see in this paper. We are struggling a little bit with how we're defining the leg positioning, the lower leg positioning specifically, because it's no longer just elevating leg rest, it's elevating and articulating, as Jillian mentioned. Do we call the power to the floor foot plate power adjustable height foot plates? Do we call it like how power seat elevation is now power adjustable seat height? Is it a power adjustable foot plate height? So we're really struggling how to encompass the expansion of lower extremity positioning and repositioning, both in the title and in the description. And then we would love to know if you feel like we have missed any specific topics, or if there's something that you in your practice you've been looking for additional evidence to support some of the seat functions that you recommend for the individuals that you work with. And then going down the path of heavily focused on pressure injuries, it takes us down the path of mortality and how, power seat functions not only prevent someone from, or any seat function, prevent someone from being on bed rest and enduring some of those secondary complications, but do we really need to take it down the path of tying it to, long-term health outcomes and overall mortality? So if you have any thoughts for us, we're open. We're not offended if you think we left something out. So please either reach out to us, or we'd love to talk to you today as time permits, or Jillian is our group leader, and you can reach out to Jillian with any of those suggestions.
And also, we know the mortality thing is not something that people want to think about, but it did come up in a few of the articles, which is why we really are thinking about if it's something that we should put in there. Nobody wants to think or talk about it. But the fact of the matter is those secondary complications really could lead to mortality.
Quote that, that research in our elements say, research has found that this is,
Okay.
Right. So maybe we're not talking to
Yeah.
clients directly about that right away, but something we can use to, yes, to justify the chairs. Yep.
Yeah, we'll have enough, I think, the positive side of the enhancing function and enhancing participation, but it also to focus on if you were to withdraw those functions, what the end result could be.
it's kind of an unclear question. Somebody making the power rate adjustment quickly again, at least for a while, I couldn't get it.
Yeah, so a couple of companies now are making like individualized, where either through a switch or through the joystick access, you can, given whatever seat to foot plate angle you have, then you can independently up, lower, and raise the foot plates. Yeah, to the floor. Yeah, not
motion concept based. We deal with this in our area, doing a couple of electric down to the ground. The other thing that they need to consider would be the flip up. And when that flips up power operated, the user can get actually on the ground.
right versus on the plate.
Being on a platform is kind of wow.
Yeah.
So that's what we've done is oftentimes I'll go to a power flip up or one to have to.
As long as they can get their leg out of the way. Yeah.
Get up.
Yeah, and we've had some subjective cases where that power adjustable foot plate height helps with comfort, sitting tolerance, edema, but we don't have the evidence to say that yet. So anything that we can find in the literature, I know the RESNA paper does give us a little bit of leeway to use clinical expertise as long as it's a group consensus. So we can definitely, even if it's not in the literature, we can just say that experience has showed us that this is a clinically relevant seat function. So that since it's not a systematic, only review, we can include some of those clinical applications. So we'll definitely bring that to our group.
Yeah, we don't want to take up anyone else's time. So we really thank you.
Chat with you.
And we'd love to chat. You can send me an email and we will definitely take those other power functions into consideration.